Thank you, man. What's that? It was good. Thanks for asking, man. Appreciate it. It's fast.
What do you want to see out of Kirk in this last game of the season? What areas do you think that you'll focus on for him as far as improvement and things that you want to see out of him?
I just want to see him play the best he can. You know, he's competed hard these last 2 weeks. He's done some real good things. I hope he continues to improve, mainly do whatever it takes to get us a win.
Has he done anything that surprised you pleasantly so far, or you see anything you didn't expect to see out of him in these last several weeks?
Not really. You know, we've been around him a lot. Got a lot of work with him last year, and in the game he started that week, got a lot of work with him this offseason since he was our starter throughout OTAs and training camp. So he's played like we've expected him to, and nothing real surprising.
How odd is this time for you, knowing the uncertainty is with the situation here?
It's different. I've never been in this situation before. A lot of us coaches haven't. It's different, but it's been the situation for a while. And as soon as you're eliminated from the playoffs at an early time, like we have been, really have had to deal with it every week. You always have a bunch of games to go forward, so you can't think about it too much. With this being the last one and nothing after it, that's for sure. It is a little bit different, but we're getting through it.
But even like people, we ask you about Kirk, we ask about Robert for the offseason. Is it weird to answer a question? You're not sure if you'll even be here to work with them.
You can't guarantee anything, but it's not hard for me to answer those questions because in my mind I will be, and if I'm not, then I'll deal with it.
Last time you faced the Giants, 5 sacks allowed with the RG3. Kirk seems to be getting the ball away pretty quickly. Is that how do you explain how he's been able to kind of avoid a lot of the pressure that Griffin had?
Well, every game's different. Robert had 13 games, and all those games are different. Kirk's played in, 2 games so far, and he's done a good job getting rid of the ball. And I think we've only given up 1 sack, but, it's just how it's been in these 2 games. And he's definitely done a good job, but it's not all him. I think the guys around him have done well, and hopefully that'll continue this week.
Kyle, you knew it was going to be a challenge coming here to work with your father. For the past 4 years, what has that been like? What have you learned from him, and what has it been like to be around him every day in a working capacity?
It's been a great experience to be with him, something that I'm definitely glad that I had or I've had. I've told you guys before, it's something that if I never would have gotten a chance to work with him, it's something I think I would have really regretted in my life. So I'm glad that it's something that I did and something I've been able to do. What I've learned from him the most, I think he's a great coach. He's one of the best coaches I've been around. I've always thought that. But you don't really know until you get to work with someone. Everything else is just asking questions at the dinner table and annoying my mom and stuff with those. But it's been nice to work with him, see what he is actually like in the office. And I think the thing that I respect about him the most and learned about him the most is, no matter how tough things are, no matter how hard of a decision you have to make, whether it's popular or not, to always do what you think's right. And if you have good intentions and you do what you believe is right, no matter how hard it is, not always taking the easier way out, then you can live with yourself. And I think he does that as much as anyone I've been around him. Even when times I'm like, ooh, I don't know if that's the easiest way to go. But, he does what he thinks right, and I respect the hell out of him for that.
Can that be challenging in that aspect where if you think one thing and he thinks something else, just having that discussion overall, is that just hard for you to approach him, or do you think it's been pretty easy in that regard?
Well, that's a challenge. I think that's always been the challenge since I've started coaching. I think as I get older, I'm a little more laid back with it. When I was younger, from when I was a G8 or a quality control, I was a lot more hard-headed, and I think like a lot of young people are. You think you got more answers, you disagree with stuff, you want to challenge things. As you get older, you're a little more peaceful with your decisions, with other people's decisions, and you realize there's a chain of command, and you deal with it and go with it. And it's gotten easier as I've gotten older because I've gotten used to it, learned how to deal with it better. But, just like having him as the head coach, I always feel comfortable. I can go to him and tell him when I do disagree with something. But I think if you ask other head coaches I've worked for, like Kubiak and Gruden and Coach Terrell at UCLA, I think they would tell you the same thing. I think I've never been a guy who's, if I disagree with something, I'm not going to keep it to myself. I feel it's my job to let my boss know, and they get to decide if they agree with that and whether it helps, or if they don't, then you move on. And the thing I always felt bad about as a coach is if you have an opinion that's going against something, if you don't tell that person. You tell that person, and then they realize that you're there to be an asset and just not someone who's second-guessing people.
Kyle, what's your expectation for how all this is going to unfold in the next week and a half?
I really try not to have an expectation. I mean, that's, to me, when you try to assume what's going to happen to stuff that's completely out of your control, I feel like that's just it's an anxiety attack waiting to happen. I kind of try to block that out as much as I can. Obviously your wife wants to know family and stuff because you really don't know what's going to be the situation, but it's out of your control. And when you worry about that stuff too much, it's impossible to focus on the job at hand. And it's not just an easy thing putting a game plan together, coaching these guys. I think our players have had some distractions too, but what I've been proud of the guys is that we have a pretty smart group of guys who really don't try to get caught up in stuff that they can't control. And, this isn't something we can control, so we go about it day by day and really trying to, every week, just put together the best thing we can to give us a chance to win on Sunday.
Do you get the sense, though, that whatever happens could and should happen pretty quickly and then everyone can go in whatever direction they're going to?
Yeah, I would think so. I don't think any of those things drag out too long, but I feel pretty good that I don't see why it would, but again, that's my guess is just as good as yours, but I would be surprised if we didn't know pretty soon.
Kyle, obviously a lot of the talk about Robert's development has been him benefiting this offseason. How hard would it be for him to grow and do the things that you want him to do this offseason while also having to possibly learn a new system, new terminology, deal with different situations and different people around here? I
don't know. Robert's a smart guy. Robert's going to be able to learn any system that someone gives him. I think systems are a little bit overrated. This isn't physics or anything. It is football, and it can be tough if you don't work at it. But Robert works at it. He'll give it his full effort, and if you do that, you're going to pick stuff up. So I don't think it matters from that standpoint. I think it's just about improving yourself from technique standpoint, seeing the game, reps, and just getting more comfortable with whatever it is that's asked of them.
As the rumor mill flew the last month or so, obviously our job is to try to dig and see what the next move is, speculation as well. Do you think we've lost sight of these are jobs we're talking about, your jobs that we're talking about? How does that affect your family, knowing that you may not be here next year, the head coach may not be here next year? How does that affect your family?
Just the rumors and stuff?
Just the fact that your job is being discussed. It's out there, that it's part of the storyline. We're talking about your job. We're not talking about our jobs. We're talking about your job and whether or not you're here next year. You hear it. I'm sure your family hears it. How do you deal with that?
I think it's as I tell my wife all the time. It's something. It's very important that you learn how to deal with it. I grew up a coach's son. I was as sensitive as can be anytime I heard negative stuff about my dad growing up. I think everybody who has a dad growing up, you don't think your dad can do wrong, so you stick up for him in anything. And then when that stuff's discussed out in the news and you got to deal with that at school, it's always a big deal. Fortunately, my kids are young, so they really could care less about football yet. So I haven't experienced that with my kids yet. But what I always tell my wife is that it's not about trying to get in a situation to me where you try to control all that. If you're going to coach in this league, and especially as the media gets bigger, I think the media is 100% different now than it was, for my dad when I was growing up. To have 5 minutes dedicated to sports at the end of the news is a lot different than 24-hour service and the tweets and everything. So it definitely has changed. And if you're going to be in this position, in this profession, you better be in it because you love it and enjoy what you do. And I've always said the most important thing for myself and how I feel and to help my family out is that you're proud of what you do. It doesn't matter whether you're good or bad. You're going to get attacked, and that's part of the profession. You can't control always your win-loss record. You can certainly have an effect, and that's why you got to try your hardest and to be the best you can, not take shortcuts, study the tape, not try to just network to get jobs. It's all about studying stuff and being as good as you can, and that gives you a chance to be successful. But you got to realize that there's only a matter of time in this profession. Every good coach, great coach has been through it. You're not going to have a good year, and when they do, whether it's right or wrong, you're going to get attacked. And if you get too caught up in that, it's going to be tough. I always make a rule for my wife, whether she follows it or not. She's not allowed to listen to the radio, even when it's good. The worst thing you can do is listen to it when it's good, because then they're going to start loving you and you're going to feel pretty good about yourself. And you got to put it in perspective. When it's bad, it's going to flip the exact other way. So you coach because it's what you enjoy doing. You like the camaraderie, you like the sport. I love what it did for my family growing up. I hope I can provide the same for my immediate family now as they get older. But that's why we do it, not for someone to tell you that you're awesome last year or someone to tell you that you suck this year. That's not what does it. And if you can keep that in perspective, then I think it'll help you enjoy your life a lot more as your career goes.
Yeah, Pierre Garçon, 107 catches, obviously a great year for him. But I think the next three guys, that's almost as many as the next three guys behind him in terms of number of catches. Is that a sign something wasn't quite right? You probably didn't plan that out at the beginning of the year, is what I'm.
Not really, and we don't plan it out going into games either. Pierre got targeted 18 times last week. I had no clue till the end of the game. It's not like we're saying throw to Pierre here. You try to put your best player in positions, moving them around to get the ball, but the coverage is going to always dictate that. They played a lot of man-to-man coverage. Pierre happened to be the number one read in the majority of those, and he won on most of them, and that's the reason he got the ball. Everywhere I've been, usually the number one receiver, whether it was Andre in Houston, Tana here the first year. I think the second year Tana got hurt some and ended up being Jabbar, who had his best career year. If you're the number one guy in this offense, you're going to get your numbers without it being forced. When you have more guys, you don't make everyone the number one read versus man-to-man coverage. I think if Jordan Reed would have stayed healthy, I think he would have taken some of those numbers away. Just like in Houston, Andre always had 100 catches, but Owen Daniels had a lot of catches too. I think Fred, before he got suspended his second year, was on pace to break the record here for the most for a tight end. I think that could have happened with Jordan this year if he stayed healthy. I think Pierre would have had a lot of catches last year, but he didn't stay healthy. So the only thing that changed was this year he was healthy, and when you throw the ball and he's usually your best player and he beats coverage, that's how it works out.
Hey, Kyle, you talked to longtime NFL people about Mike, and one of the things they say he's going to go down as one of the great play callers. People remember him when he was with when he was coordinating the offense in Denver, and when he was in San Francisco, and then even when he went back to Denver as a head coach. That play calling, having a feel, not just the scheme and everything before the game, but that in the game, in the thick of it, he was really great at that. Where do you think you are at in terms of your development as, not just an offensive coach, but specifically with where are you at now as a play caller after, having been in Houston and now here for 4 years directing this offense?
I'm pretty confident in myself. I don't want to sit up here and tell you guys how good I think I am, but, I've called plays I've been a coordinator 6 years. I've called plays, I believe, for 7 different quarterbacks. Obviously some games are better than others. I think I can still have a lot of room to improve. But over these 6 years, I feel we've had a top 10 offense 4 out of those 6 years, a top 5 offense 3 out of those 6 years. I've done it with 7 different quarterbacks and done it with really doing a different type of scheme every single year. So, I do feel good about myself as far as I think I'm good at what I do. I'm not really trying hard not to brag on myself or anything. I was just trying to answer your question honestly, that I'm confident in what I've done and I'm confident in my future, and I look forward to, whether it's here or anywhere, getting an opportunity, and I hope that I do. If it isn't here, and I feel confident that I'll continue to do a good job. You don't have a good record, and that starts with myself just as much as anybody else. The ultimate goal is wins, and I can tell you that we didn't win enough this year, which is obvious. And I'm going to feel pretty bad at the end of the year because of that. But I can also tell you guys how crappy I felt last year at the end of that year. Losing that playoff game was as hard of any losses I've been around, and I'm still not quite over that. And pretty much every year I'm going to be pretty miserable at the end of the year until some year I win a Super Bowl. And hopefully I get a chance to do that, and we have a great offense in it, and that feels a lot better. But if we win a Super Bowl someday and playing great defense and don't have the numbers on offense, I'll still feel just as good. So kind of rambling about your answer, but I feel good in myself, and I know I still got to improve. You either get better or worse, and I plan on being better from this year and getting better in this offseason.
Kyle, if things were to change, what do you think the Shanahan legacy is here in Washington? Both either you and your dad, but specifically your dad. What imprint do you think he left here in D.C.?
I don't know. I think legacies to me are up for you guys to write about and for people to decide. I personally think he's done some real good things here. I think he took over a tougher situation than he thought. I think fighting through the salary cap issue we've had has been tough. But I am proud of some stuff that we've done here. It's kind of hard for me to comment from a whole team standpoint. But I mean, I can comment from an offensive standpoint, but that's not really answering your question. But I know that he came in here and he worked his hardest to improve a tough situation. I think the salary cap issue was definitely a lot harder than he expected, mainly with it being that we didn't think that we were going to get $36 million taken from us. We thought we were going to do that within the rules, which definitely has a huge effect on the team. And I don't want to get caught up too much in that because it's really out of my realm. But when I put in the offensive perspective, I know the total of our 5-0 linemen and our running back isn't $18 million. And so that's 5 starters on O-line and a starter at halfback, and that's just 18. That's half of the 36. So I do know from the people who put a team together, being the head coach and the GM, that was a pretty tough deal for them. It's not an excuse. You've got to deal with it. But I don't know what his legacy will be. That's up to you guys. I know that it hasn't changed with myself, and I don't think it has with some other people who view it the same way I do.
If you look at this offense, you have Pierre, you don't have anybody consistent receiving threat opposite him. How much did that help the offense next year, or regardless of whether the system or whether the situation is, just to have a consistent threat opposite him?
Oh, it always helps. I believe that I'll be very surprised if the offense here is in a top 5 offense again next year. We're going to finish probably in the top 10 this year. Definitely didn't score enough points, turned it over too much. But I feel, when we came in here, we replaced all 11 starters. We had to do that by our 3rd year. We didn't really inherit a starter. I think we've done that without a salary cap and without too many draft choices. And so I do think a lot of these guys that we have on this offense, on a top 10 offense this year and top 5 last year, I think a lot of them are young players who haven't cost a lot of money. Who makes the future very bright for this organization. I think you got a guy like Jordan Reed who comes back, who I think has a chance to be one of the better tight ends in the league. I think Hankerson is a big deal, and that's just the people that we already have. And when you have those people already, if they can stay healthy, you already got a top 5 offense. And then if you're hopefully that there's actually money next year to be spent, you add a couple more players, you actually use a draft pick, and I think it makes a difference in the world.
What else? Thanks, Kyle.
All right, guys.